Today I want to leave you with a bit of a reminder. This is for all Christians who are seeking what we are always seeking here at ChristianLifeCoaching.org, and that is joy and fulfillment in our Christian walk. It seems like a lot of people expect their life to suddenly become easy when they become Christians. And the truth is that even though we walk with a newness of life, we are new creatures in Christ, we are dead to sin and alive in Him, even though all that is true, we still live every day in a fallen world. Now, what do I mean by that? What do I mean by a fallen world? Well, let's go back to the beginning, to the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve made the decision to try to become like God, to know the difference between good and evil. What happened after that is commonly referred to as the fall. Now, what fell? I think a lot of times we forget what fell and how far we have fallen. Even now as Christians, living sanctified lives, living new lives that are set apart for God's service and God's use, even now, we still have to deal with the consequences of the fall, of that original sin. Now, some of us need reminding of this, and some of us live with daily reminders of how far we have fallen as a human race. Now, as a fallen people, we have to deal with, every day, the consequences of sin. Not just our own sin, but also sin in the lives of others. Now, through Christ, sin's eternal power over us has been broken. Sin no longer has eternal power over us. We live new lives. However, we still have to deal with the daily consequences of sin. This includes things that we did before we became Christians, and things that we do as Christians that don't align with God's will for our lives. For example, if you had a child out of wedlock before you became a Christian, even after you become a Christian, you still have a responsibility to raise that child in a godly way. You can't just walk away from your child. If after you become a Christian, you disrespect your husband or your wife in some way, you still have to deal with the emotional fallout of that decision, of that sin. So we're not free from the consequences, the immediate consequences of the things that we do wrong. What we are free from is a life in slavery to those wrong choices, those wrong decisions. Here's another example. There are a lot of people who lived lives of public crime before they became Christians. And then once they were incarcerated, once they were in prison, they turned their lives over to the Lord. Now, just because they became believers, just because they're forgiven for their sins, doesn't mean that they can just walk free out of the prison. They still need to pay the price for the crimes that they've committed here on earth. Now, I don't mean this video to be a complete downer for you. We can still have peace and joy and fulfillment in our hearts, despite living with the consequences of our sin, despite living in a fallen world. And that is what we are pursuing at ChristianLifeCoaching.org, is that peace, that joy, that fulfillment that we are promised as children of God, despite the fact that we live in a fallen world and that we still have to deal with the consequences of our sin. There is hope. There's always hope.